Many thousands of years ago, the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians, by Pharaoh. One man, Moses, had seen an Egyptian kill a Jewish man, and he wanted redemption. Moses was out in the field tending his flock one night when he noticed a bush burst into flames. The bush spoke to Moses. "Moses," it said, "you will be the one to free the Jewish people from enslavement." Moses instantly recognized the voice of God. "How can I do that?" said Moses. "I will show you the way," said God. "Trust me." Moses went to Pharaoh and spoke to him. "Pharaoh, I've been instructed by God himself to come to you. I need you to free the Jews from enslavement." Pharaoh laughed. "Free the Jews?" And he threw him out of the palace. Moses didn't know what to do. That night God spoke to him again. "Your brother Aaron," said God. "Get him to throw his stick into the Nile." "Throw his stick into the Nile?" said Moses. "How will this help?" "You will see, and then you'll go back to Pharaoh." God said to Moses, "If Pharaoh doesn't do what you ask, he will be visited by 10 plagues. Go and tell Pharaoh this and see what he says." Moses went to Pharaoh, and he said to Pharaoh, "I have been instructed by God to come to you and to ask you for the freedom of the Jews. If you do not give me this freedom, then 10 plagues will be visited upon you." Pharaoh laughed, threw him out. Moses' brother, Aaron, was given the task of going to the Nile with a stick, a staff. And he threw the staff into the Nile. And as the staff hit the water, the Nile turned to blood. Moses returned to Pharaoh. "Look what I have done," he said. "Look what God has brought upon you. The water that now feeds your children, that feeds your troops, and feeds your court, is now blood. You will die of thirst. You must now allow me to walk free from these lands with the Jewish people." Pharaoh was angry, and he increased the labour on the Jewish people. He made them work even harder and made them suffer even more. Moses returned to God. "God," he said, "what are you doing? Now Pharaoh is very angry, and he is hurting our people even more than they can bear." But God said to Moses, "Return to Pharaoh and tell him the next of the plagues will be visited upon him." That's exactly what Moses did. He returned to Pharaoh's court and said to Pharaoh, "Pharaoh, you have angered God. Now you must let the Jews free." "Never," said Pharaoh. And that is when the next plague visited the Egyptians. The plague of frog and toads descended upon Egypt, hopped all through the land. Pharaoh still would not let the Jews go. A plague of lice infested every man, woman and child. Still, Pharaoh was resolute and would not let the Jews go. Next, a horde of animals invaded the land. They ate everything they could get hold of, and they dirtied the streets and sullied the temples of Pharaoh. But still Pharaoh would not relent. Then God sent a pestilence upon the animals, and the animals died painfully, slowly. Still, even after all this, Pharaoh would not allow the Jews to leave Egypt. And so God sent fire and ice from the skies. It burnt, scalded, it froze the people of Egypt. And still, Pharaoh absolutely refused to allow the Jews freedom. Then, a great darkness descended upon Egypt, so thick, so palpable, nobody could see their way around. After the fire and ice, when Moses returned to Pharaoh, Pharaoh was little more listenable to. He said to Moses, I'll tell you what, Moses, I'll let the men go free. But the women and children, they must stay and must continue to work the fields. Moses didn't even think about the answer. No, he said, all Jews must be free. All my people must be able to walk away from Egypt. It was then the most terrible of plagues came upon Egypt. A plague of locusts descended. It ate every single crop, every single plant, anything that was green was eaten by the locusts. Then darkness descended. A thick, palpable darkness came down upon the land. And finally, God said to Moses, Moses, tell your people they must sacrifice a lamb. And with the lamb's blood, they must smear their doorsteps and their doors. Whatever for, said Moses. Trust me, Moses, said God. Trust me. It was then perhaps the most dreadful plague came upon Egypt. God sent angels down, and these angels were to kill the firstborn of every woman in Egypt, apart from the Jews. Now the Jews were marked out by the blood over their doors and their doorstep of the Lamb. The angels came down and they passed over every door that was smeared with the Lamb's blood. Even Pharaoh's child was killed, and he changed his mind because of this. He summoned Moses and his brother Aaron, and he told them, take your people and leave Egypt. And Moses looked at his brother and looked at Pharaoh, and he asked Pharaoh, you won't go back on this, will you? No, said Pharaoh, I can take no more. My people can take no more. And so Moses summoned all of the Jewish people of Egypt, and as one, they left. And so, to this day, we celebrate Passover in remembrance of the Jews, the Jewish people that left Egypt. They were pursued by Pharaoh, and you might have heard the story of Moses parting the Red Seas to allow the Jewish people to cross the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's great army capitulated when the sea's walls fell in upon them. And Passover is about that. It's about emancipation, about freedom. The Jewish people celebrate this by eating lamb at this time of year, and with bitter herbs, and they eat unleavened bread that doesn't rise, matzah, and it's a very celebratory time of the year for the Jewish people, indeed for everybody. It's about life, it's about finding new life, and about being free, about being able to express yourself. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye-bye.